Hello YouTube. Hello Ryan. Today is the 6th step underwater photography. Part 2. The different type of picture you can take underwater. Underwater photography is great, but don't damage the environment. Always make sure that you have a nice buoyancy, or if you want to have a negative buoyancy, that you stand on a place where it's only sand and you cannot damage corals or anything. During this video, we'll talk about the different type of picture we can take underwater: wide angle, macro, and super macro.
You can't wait on other people to be what you've been called to be. You can't wait on their affirmation. You can't wait on their approval. You can't wait on their support. Sometimes you just got to run and look behind you and say, everybody who wants to run, run, but I can't stop running because you're not running with me. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life won't chase it with you. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life won't believe in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.
Wide-angle photography is taking pictures of landscape, big fish, or divers. Can also be all of the above. To have a subject in the foreground or the background is important, even if your goal is to take a nice landscape picture. Like this, it's going to give contrast. You can use any type of camera, point and shoot, action camera, or DSLR. To have a nice composition, always think about where your subject should be, which angle, and how the landscape will look like. Having a good visibility is a must when you take wide-angle photography. The light or strobe is mainly important to lead the foreground. The background, though, will be too far and won't be affected with the light so much. So you'll need to have a good speed to make the blue have a nice color. Using action cameras like this one, you will need to use flip red filters that will allow you to bring back the colors. With point and shoot, you can use ambient lights and also set the white balance to have a nice color. Even though it will be better to use a flash, strobe, to lit the foreground and make a nice contrast between the red in the foreground and the blue in the background. When shooting with my G16, I like to have a speed of 1/125. Like this, my water is very nice and blue. And when I use the strobe, the foreground gets back all of the red and orange colors and make it a very nice contrast. When shooting with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, you're going to want to use a wide-angle lens or even a fisheye and have a dome port that will allow you to have a wide range. This will allow you also to do over-under pictures that are very nice, having half of the picture with the outside and the rest underwater. Using DSLRs or mirrorless, it's very interesting to have one or two strobes that will lit the foreground and also potentially your subject if it's a big animal or a diver, and still have a very nice blue for the background. Macro photography is when you want to take pictures of small subjects and use a ratio of 1:1. To do macro photography, you need to be very steady. So it's important to find a location where there is no corals or anything that you can damage. Just lay on the bottom, maybe get negative buoyancy a little bit, and then you can take all the time you need to take your pictures without damaging anything. When shooting small animals, especially the moving ones, it's important to know their behavior and their safety distance. Some animals you can get very close to them. Some of them you have to be a minimum at 1 or so meters. So approach your subject slowly and make sure you don't scare it. Most of the time it's actually better if you stay in one position and wait for the subject to come in your direction. Non-moving animals are the easiest targets for beginners. Nudibranch, crabs that don't move too much, or even clownfish or animals that stay in the same place. For macro photography, the background is very important. So either you have a nice colorful background that is a nice contrast with your subject, or you want to take a picture with the water in the background and then either get blue or black in the background. We'll talk about this technique in a later section. One of the main advantages of the point and shoot is that you can zoom and you will get a subject big enough even if you're not so close. Then with DSLR and mirrorless, you're going to need to use a macro lens. It can be a 60mm or, depending on the brand, a 90 to a 105. And you will use a flat port. It's very nice to have a focus light and a strobe. Like this, the focus will be very sharp and you will bring all of the colors from your subject. By finding the good focus distance, you're going to get very sharp animals and even be able to focus on having sharp eyes and make your subject very, very nice. And finally, the super macro. Super macro is when you take pictures that will actually appear bigger than the size of the animal. You will need to use a diopter. Most of them will be between +5 and +15. This will allow you to magnify your subject and get it, even if it's a very small. Using the diopter, you have a very small working distance. So you will really need to be between such and such distance to have a sharp picture. You will need to be very steady because any movement will have a big effect on the picture you take. Blurriness or even losing the subject or messing up your composition. One of the great things about super macro is that you can take pictures and see things that you wouldn't even see with your own eyes. Don't forget for super macro that you need to be very steady. So it's important, like it was for macro photography, to find a nice place where you don't damage anything and can stay and not move at all. For the background of the picture, you have two options. Number one, the background is nice and you can have the subject pop up. It's not disturbing and it looks nice on the picture, then you can use it. Otherwise, and most of the time, you will need to find a blue background. So you will take your pictures from under to up and will find a blue background that will make the subject pop very nicely. With point and shoot, it's important to have a focus light and at least one strobe. Two would be better because you really want your camera to be able to do the focus. The working distance is very small, so you're going to have to be at the right position, but you will definitely need the help of a focus light. Using point and shoot, you will need to zoom your camera, use a diopter, and that's going to allow you to take the nicest picture possible. Personally, I always move my focus point and use one focus point and move it on the eye of my subject. Like this, I can decide the composition I want and still have the sharpest point where I decide I want it. Using a DSLR or mirrorless, you're going to need to use a macro lens between 90 and 105 depending on the brands, and also a diopter that can go from +5 to +15. When using a diopter, especially when you have one with like this one, 12.5 plus 12.5, you will have a very small working distance. So it's very important to find the exact position where you need to put your camera. Trying it many times will help you a lot, and then eventually it will become natural and you will know what distance you need to have between the camera and the subject. And then the strobes will bring the light, so you can have either one or two, or use a snoot that will point exactly the light where you want. I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't hesitate to put a thumbs up, put a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.